Blake Lively panics as Penn Badgley exposes the dark truth when dating her.
You were dating Blake Lively. You were dating Serena on the show.
Mhm.
Did you feel like you were able to separate your actual job from your reality and actually able to grow in your 20s? Or did it all feel like it was kind of merged?
I mean, that's a great question because it was the struggle.
And it's nothing like the love story fans believe for years. The red carpets, the chemistry, the fairy tale romance. It was all real on the surface. But what Penn just revealed, it paints a far more complicated and heartbreaking picture of what was really going on behind the scenes. While the world saw Serena and Dan living their glamorous fairy tale, Penn says the truth was far darker, riddled with emotional pressure, identity struggles, and a spotlight he never asked for. But what made him speak up now? And was Blake really the golden girl, or just playing the part? You're about to find out. And wait until you hear what Penn confessed about the moment he knew their relationship couldn't survive. You're not going to believe it. Like, share, comment below, and subscribe to Chatterfuse, where the real stories unfold. On the surface, Penn Badgley and Blake Lively had it all, matching red carpet looks, that unmistakable chemistry, and a fan base that treated them like royalty. To millions of Gossip Girl fans, they were Dan and Serena, a love story too perfect to fail. But behind that glossy Hollywood filter, a young man was quietly grappling with fame he never fully wanted, and a relationship unfolding under the weight of public fantasy.
Interfacing in that space can actually feel really crazy, and you suddenly feel the need to perform, and you're just like, why can't I just say something fucking normal?
Imagine being in love and completely lost at the same time. That kind of pressure doesn't just crack a relationship, it can break a person. As the paparazzi flashes intensified, so did the tension. Not just with the media, but inside the relationship itself. The picture-perfect romance was starting to splinter, quietly, painfully, and far from the cameras. While Blake dazzled on magazine covers, posed for Chanel campaigns, and floated through Fashion Week like she was born for it, Penn was unraveling behind the scenes, suffocating under the weight of a role he never signed up for. But it wasn't just Blake he was performing for. It was the entire idea of the couple they had become, a carefully curated brand of love, built on gossip columns, fan edits, and scripted interviews. Every public moment, from holding hands in New York to sharing glances during interviews, wasn't just captured, it was devoured. Paparazzi didn't follow them, they hunted them. Every subtle shift in body language became headline fuel. Every unsmiling photo, a tabloid theory. And Penn, he wasn't just under the microscope, he was shrinking beneath it.
Not enough separation, I think, for anybody. You're seen as this person, you're called their name out on the street. You also constantly have to be that person at work.
He later said he was performing a version of himself. Even in private, it's one thing to act on screen, it's another to live in character, 24/7. Blake, ever graceful, leaned into the spotlight with ease. The world adored her. But for Penn, it felt like being the plus one in his own life. Their romance stopped feeling real and started feeling produced. And franchises, they don't leave room for emotional breakdowns. So Penn broke down, in silence. He pulled inward, not in anger, not in defiance, but in quiet resistance. Authenticity became a luxury he couldn't afford. And the more Blake flourished, the more Penn faded, privately battling a version of himself he no longer recognized. What once was love was now performance. And the final curtain was approaching. For Penn, the hardest part wasn't the fame. It was what that fame did to his sense of self. He wasn't just Blake Lively's boyfriend. He wasn't just Dan Humphrey. He was the quiet guy living in the shadow of someone else's spotlight. And slowly, those lines began to blur. Between the character, the boyfriend, and the real person he used to be before the world knew his name.
And I was 20, I was 21, 22. So I didn't have the emotional maturity to understand, to how to differentiate myself just in terms of self-worth. Like what people seem to think of Dan seemed to be what people thought of me.
In an interview, he admitted, "It was disorienting. I didn't know where Penn ended." And Dan began. While Blake was rising, polished, poised, iconic, Penn was questioning everything. Did people like him? Or just the polished version tied to a CW show and a red carpet fantasy? That's the part no one saw. The quiet erosion of identity behind the flashbulbs and applause. And sometimes, the hardest place to feel lost is inside a relationship the whole world thinks is perfect. There was no dramatic fight, no cheating scandal, no headline-grabbing meltdown. Their ending came the same way their story had started, under the radar, just out of frame. As Blake's star kept rising, Penn began retreating, emotionally, creatively, spiritually. Behind every public appearance was growing silence. The Serena and Dan fantasy fans loved, that version had already ended. Those close to them say the breakup was calm, mutual, but Penn's words later painted something heavier.
Dating is a bit of a performance, I think, right? Isn't it? Like, I mean, it's initially like that's, and I think that just like really stressed me out. I never had an approach. So trying to like, I really longed for that kind of connection, that kind of intimacy.
He wasn't just walking away from a relationship, he was walking away from a version of himself that no longer existed. There was no goodbye post, no podcast spill, just a shift. One day they were everywhere, and then they weren't. And sometimes, that's the most painful kind of ending. The one where nobody notices you're hurting, because you've been smiling through it the whole time. After the quiet unraveling, Blake thrived. She booked film after film, floated through Fashion Week, and started dating the man she'd eventually marry, Ryan Reynolds. Her brand? Effortless, untouchable, iconic. Meanwhile, Penn disappeared. By design. He wasn't running away. He was preserving what little of himself was left. He turned down offers, stepped out of the limelight, and started over. He explored smaller roles, took up activism, became a father, and slowly found a quieter kind of purpose. It wasn't a rivalry, it was a reflection of two people who shared a stage, but ultimately chased peace in very different ways. Penn never blamed Blake. He's spoken of her with deep respect, but the love they shared, that belonged to another time, another version of who they were. This wasn't a dramatic Hollywood fallout. There were no villains here, just two people growing in opposite directions. Penn's honesty peeled back the velvet curtain of fame. It showed us what really hides behind the curated couple selfies and red carpet kisses. It's easy to idolize these stories. It's harder to admit that even the fairy tales come at a price. Because sometimes the roles we're asked to play in public completely consume who we are in private. Not every heartbreak is loud, some are quiet, some are clean, and those, they echo the longest. Today, Blake Lively is a fashion icon, a businesswoman, and a mother of four. Penn Badgley, a dad, a husband, a voice of introspection in a world full of noise. Their paths are different now, and maybe they were never truly meant to merge forever. But the shadow of what they were, Hollywood's golden couple, it lingers in every fan photo, every rerun, every whispered, what if? And now that Penn has spoken, it begs the question, what other so-called perfect love stories are quietly breaking under the weight of fame? We may never know. But we do know this, not all breakups are scandalous. Some are necessary. And some, like this one, are heartbreakingly human. If this story moved you, hit like, share it with someone who remembers Gossip Girl, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Chatter Fuse, where we tell the stories that fame tries to hide.